Started recording. Didn't know we were
Oh.
starting.
Sorry. Okay. I start over. Are you ready?
Yep.
Sorry, Andrew. Good morning. This is Tanya Moffett, Chair of the Board of Accountancy's Complaints Committee. I'm calling this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, August 15th, 2024, and the time is not 8:37. This meeting is being recorded and being held in person at the board's offices as well as via Zoom video. Please be sure to mute your mic through Zoom or mute your phone if participating by the phone. When you wish to speak, please unmute. Please do not use the chat room for any discussions. Should any technical issues arise, we will pause the meeting until it is resolved. Matthew, will you now take a roll call of members and guests? Please identify yourself and state whether you are participating by phone or by Zoom.
Andrew, can you do that?
You asked for Matthew.
Oh, sorry, Andrew, sorry.
John Wallace.
He stepped away from his.
He stepped away.
Rachel Reardon.
Here, attending via Zoom.
Bryce Wilberger.
Here by Zoom.
Brad Bingenheimer.
Present by Zoom.
Norm Rush.
Present via Zoom.
Angie Hunt.
Here via Zoom. Sorry, I was eating my breakfast.
Greg Rogers.
Here via Zoom.
Megan Kurz.
Here via Zoom.
Is there anyone else on Zoom that I missed?
Sean's back.
Sean Wallace, present on Zoom, also handling door ringing.
Jeremiah Leppert, present by Zoom.
Andrew Barlow by Zoom and in board office.
Tanya Moffett, Chair, in the board office.
Scott Wright in the office, board office.
Martin Piccioni juggling breakfast like Angie, but in the office.
And there is no one in our waiting room.
Okay. Review and approval of the agenda. Are there any changes?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll take a second.
I second.
So moved.
Any discussion? Motion carries. We will now convene to executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 Prim 2, Prim F and H. Executive session may be recessed at any time during the day for public session items as necessary to accommodate committee workflow.
Okay.
So now,
Rachel, if you can still hear us, we're going to have to move you out into the waiting room. I'm
Okay,
happy to.
no problem.
I would love to connect with you offline at some point.
She's already gone.
That's okay. I know how to get a hold of her.
okay. So sorry, I got to switch to my other agenda. Okay. This is executive session for the BOACC on August 15th, 2024. The time is 8:41. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 Prim 2 Prim F for the consideration of information which is exempt from public disclosure. This meeting is being recorded. Any matters discussed in executive session may not be discussed outside of executive session. So there we go. Review of the agenda. Any questions, concerns? Okay. Moving on to review of executive session summary. I think I'll hand it over to you, Jeremiah.
I have nothing to say about those summaries.
Okay.
I hope you enjoy reading them.
Anyone have any questions or comments?
I did a quick question. on the February 15th board summary. Under investigation reports B2, there is a matter related to Curtis E. Robertson. For some reason, I did not recall, I'm not sure if this summary is the same as the matter. I didn't recall this person being, this was a situation where the CPA was the trustee for an elderly person who was in an assisted living facility. This summary references that the elderly person was perhaps a partner in a firm with Mr. Robertson and that they were unable to operate the firm. That part didn't trigger any recollection for me, and I kind of went back to the first one. So I thought maybe it would be wise for us to just kind of review that summary and make sure that it wasn't a carryover from perhaps another set of minutes. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen in this session, but maybe just a question.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that might be a carryover. I'll get that fixed.
July.
So Jeremiah, you understand what we need to look at and see
Yeah.
what needs to be done? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Megan, for catching that.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Moving on to item 4A1, review of pending investigation and inquiry dockets. Any questions on any of those for Jeremiah? I'm glad to see they're going down. Okay. Moving on to item 4B, investigation reports. 23-036, Justin Kim.
Okay, so Justin Kim was licensed in May of 2020, so his first renewal was June of 22. He did not renew. We were very behind on that renewal season, so the notices of lapse didn't go out until January of 23. But technically his lapse was, backdated to July 1st. After he was notified of the lapse, he kept practicing, kept saying like, oh, I'll get right on it. I'll get right on it. There were multiple delays in reinstatement from January when he was notified through August. In May, when we reached out to him, he had only done 20 hours. We got his reinstatement application at the end of August. While lapsed, DOR received 35 returns signed by him. During the investigation, we found he was using the name Kim and Associates, even though it was just him. He had a website that showed like his dad was working for him, but he was not. He registered the plural name with the Secretary of State in January of 22. We told him about the plural firm name rules and explained how he needed to come into compliance, what steps he could take in October of 23. And again, when I reached out to him and when Andrew reached out to him, we just got like, oh yeah, I'll get right on it. After this report was finalized, he finally did get on it. He filed a DBA with the Secretary of State to keep that Kim and Associates as the company, just using his name for practice until he can get a second licensee in his firm.
Any discussion? Brad,
I guess
saw you go first.
he says that he didn't know he needed to renew his license. I mean, when you get it, it has an expiration date on it. I don't buy that.
This is Andrew. I have had this happen with several young CPAs. When I mean several, it's been about 4 to 6 in the last year that didn't realize that.
So is there some sort of notification opportunity when you get your license? Like, hey, the expiration date means you have action to take in this.
And you've got to renew.
There's actually multiple steps here. It's just process-wise, and Andrew, I know you're listening, you can tell me if I miss one. But essentially, you get an initial letter with your initial license that says, hey, here's, you've been approved for initial licensure, here's your license, and here are your CPE obligations, and here's the cycle, right? So that letter in and of itself, and that's usually at the same time as they get the card that has the expiration date, right? Has very specific language around this license is not forever. You need to actually renew it, right? Not to mention that they're supposed to be somewhat knowledgeable about our laws and rules, which is about, has the whole renewal concept all over it. So it's not just what's on the card or on the, on the physical card itself, right? There are, quite frankly, multiple other places where that becomes pretty obvious.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So in this particular instance, I don't know if Mr. Kim is playing very footloose and fancy free with, I don't think this stuff applies to me, or he is incapable of understanding that there are rules that do apply to him. And it's important that he does apply to it. Now, to the extent there are other folks, younger folks, to your point, Andrew, is that there's others that way. Maybe we need to send them a text so they would understand. They will read a text. They won't read a piece of paper. Perhaps maybe that's what we need to do. But in any case, with respect to this particular case, he's not the type of person I necessarily want to have a license, if at all possible.
I think, go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with what Brad was saying. Even if initially, if he wasn't aware that there was a renewal, even though you do receive a renewal notice and from the board and those kinds of things, the fact that Jeremiah followed up with him multiple times to see where he was in the process, he was well aware that he was practicing with a lapsed license, even if initially he wasn't aware of that. During the whole follow-on process, he certainly was aware of it. That it seems like at that point in time.
Well, and I think for me personally, part of the thing that I was frustrated with is like in the emails, it says I'm wrapping it up, I'm working on my CPE, but then if you go look at the dates of the CPE, he wasn't doing CPE when he was saying he was doing CPE. And so I'm like, you're flat out lying. So that was a little bit frustrating to me as well in this particular case.
This is Andrew. I just wanted to inform, he also has not submitted his renewal yet for the 2024 year.
I asked Andrew to double check before this.
He was notified twice for the renewal.
I don't see any reason to spend too much more time on this. Clearly, he's in violation. Like, it's somewhat black and white. I don't particularly care about any sort of leniency in this case. It's.
So one thing just to clarify, so technically you don't have to renew, right? What the violation would be practicing without a license. So we'd need to know that he's practicing without a license. And then if he is practicing without a license, then you could revoke him for that.
Madam Chair, for
we've
procedural
had
matters.
contact. Sorry, I just want to say to Angie's point, we've had contact with him since June 30th, like about the plural firm name issue. And he's still practicing.
They've updated the firm name on the website now. It's Justin J. Kim, CPA, PC. His dad is a CPA, as we mentioned before, is active on our site. And so that's yet another thing that makes it sort of unbelievable that he would not know, right? If this is kind of a familial thing that he has an obligation to renew.
Megan, you say it says PC?
Yes, Justin J. Kim, CPA, PC.
Has the PC registered?
Wouldn't we already know that? Does anybody know if we already checked that? If they've done at least the Secretary of State thing?
But as a PC, they would have to register a firm. I know they're not doing audits, but because there's a corporate entity, don't they have to register the firm as well?
The PC would not need to register. We don't care about the business entity type. We just care the number of practitioners. If it's just him, he doesn't need to register that. But it was filed as with the Secretary of State on July 15th.
Madam Chair, for procedural matters, I'm gathering you would like me to make motions when we get to public session. Is that?
Yes, I appreciate
Okay.
that.
And then as far as egregiousness on this one, to your point, Sean, I don't know any leniency is there. Certainly no less than moderate, if not approaching high, just simply because he seems to refuse to really engage in the process in a meaningful way.
Insufficiently non-egregious.
Just kind of to the tone of all of this. So I think I'm on the right website. So Brian Kim is listed as the managing partner, but what's kind of odd is that they're registered as a PC professional corporation and they're calling themselves partners. So their tax knowledge in general is somewhat
Suspect.
different. I mean,
I don't think it's them. I think it's just Justin. Part of this was that Justin listed that he was working for his dad's firm at some point, and we contacted the dad in a separate matter, and he said Justin does not work for me, and he has not since 2021.
interesting.
Yeah.
And that he does not work with Justin and Justin's firm. They're separate things.
Yeah,
So-
I've talked about that specific angle with Jeremiah before in this case, and it's actually painful because you can see a dad essentially distancing himself as much as he can because he understands that there is a problem.
You see,
Oh, okay. Any further discussion? Item 4C, request for direction, there is none. Item 4D, request for direction on inquiries. Let's go ahead and start with 2023 INQ -041.
Okay, so this one came to you guys before, where the complainant said Minkoff made a bunch of errors. He didn't return his flash drives. He said that Minkoff refused to correct the errors without additional compensation. And Minkoff said, you know, we got the notice of an adjustment to refund, but the AGI and taxable income agreed to the return. And Minkoff said he'd correct it for client errors, but that would cost more, as would this abatement request that the client made for a prior year that he didn't prepare. Minkoff said, you know, I relied on client info and I gave him all his stuff back. So after you guys heard that the first time, going back to Minkoff gave more detail on where the figures originated from or where they did not originate from, because some of it was about a rental amount that was there that the client said he didn't have. And basically, it all came from the client. Stallings left a voicemail that Minkoff gave me a copy of, saying that he's given them everything and that he confirmed to Minkoff's bookkeeping staff that all the bookkeeping was complete. Everything's in there. It's good to go. So everything came from the client.
Comments?
this guy's a grifter. Can we just squash this thing? I mean, we had that similar discussion last time. I know there was a few things we wanted to look at, but I didn't learn anything new. And the CPA did everything in his power to move the needle forward to correct this, including follow his engagement letter, offer to correct things. You can't get a POA. I can't do anything else. Like, what a waste of his professional life to have to deal with this guy.
I agree with you on that, Sean. A couple of things that did come to mind though, and I don't remember if we talked about before. In terms of the small claims issue being filed, did Mr. Minkoff ever disclose the settlement or the dismissal of the case? Would he be required, if it was dismissed, would he still have a reporting requirement and counsel?
Do we have to for small claims? I guess I don't understand the difference between small and large claims in this case, but this was
I mean, it's a civil case.
Right. Would he, in that Stallings dismissed it, would Mr. Minkoff still have a responsibility to report it to us as a conclusion of a case? And if so, did he do that?
He did not do it contemporaneously. He did it when we asked for it. So he notified us about it whenever that first response was, which was October of 23. It says when was it dismissed? Like April of 23?
Yeah, April of 20, on September 23, September 25th, 23, the matter was heard in court. Stallings filed a motion to dismiss with prejudice. Stallings, the guy that filed the suit.
Okay,
No settlement was
September.
reached.
So then it would have been within the timeframe.
Yeah, because they don't have to notify us until it's resolved. So it went from September 25th to October 12th. That's within the 45 days.
It's one of those ones where, again, yes, I agree. Mr. Stallings is not a person I'd like to deal with, but unfortunately, if other things popped up along the way, once you open the door, strange things come to light.
Okay. Any further discussion on this one?
I would imagine in public session, I would bring a motion to close this matter.
Okay, moving on to item 2024 INQ-006.
Okay. This is my favorite one. So we got a bunch of emails over the course of several months from John McCabe, who has complained before about this particular school district. His main complaint centered around the district's accounting practices, recording property tax revenues and the interest earned from that revenue. And Polly Rogers did their audit for the year ended June 30, 23. McCabe provided two different copies of an audit. One he said he got from the Department of Ed, and one that was released to the public. He stated by filing different copies, it shows that the firm was not independent of the district. The firm had told him that filing is not the firm's responsibility. Filing with the Department of Ed is the district's responsibility, and referred McCabe to go talk to the district. And he did. I have like 50 emails between him and Department of Ed and the district. And he did have one TAC that was successful in getting some kind of response from Department of Revenue. They were accounting for the interest incorrectly. It's supposed to be allocated a particular way. But that's, again, that's the district's accounting. That's not really the audit. But anyway, because they did it wrong and the audit did not catch it, he was saying that this is a lack of independence. As to the two reports that are out there, the copy of in the response, the firm said that a copy of the auditor report had been given to the client to include in board material because the firm had received a rep letter back saying everything was good and everything was accounted for. A copy of the report was then sent by the district to Department of Ed, and the firm was not clear who did that, how that happened. No copies of that report went to any other user. Before the final report was issued, the district got a new accountant that wanted to make changes. So all those changes were made before the final report was issued. That's the thing that McCabe latched on, is that, the reports didn't agree. The final report on the district's website and the Secretary of State agree. And that final copy was also sent to Department of Ed. There were some emails between McCabe and Department of Ed where he was questioning whether the department had received that final copy, but it was right around the time frame that it was being released, like in between the first copy that Department of Ed got from the district and the final copy. He was emailing them about whether or not they had gotten a final copy. So there was some confusion on the timing. But anyway, Department of Ed has the final copy. Secretary of State has the final copy. One copy was issued to Department of Ed before it was authorized to have been released. The firm said we don't really know how the updated reports weren't dated properly because the manager and the lead on the engagement are no longer with the firm, and there's nothing in their work papers about not doing the updated dating. But they said, you know, even though the dating may be improper, it wouldn't affect the financials. It wouldn't have changed, other than the date, it would not have affected the report. They didn't see that it was a harm to the public. They pointed out, you know, the mission of the board is to protect the public.
Discussion?
Is John just a concerned citizen? Like, what's the end game for him?
John is a chronically concerned citizen. He used to have some kind of PAC that was in support of the school district, but then they had a bond several years ago that he disagreed with how they were using it, and he has since turned it into a campaign against the district.
So he's coming after Polly Rogers to get to the district?
Yeah, he filed a complaint before against Polly Rogers.
I remember it vaguely.
Because of how the district was allocating interest, and he was saying that the district had some kind of nefarious goal of basically walking right up to the line of saying someone was stealing interest money. And he filed a complaint at the time against the district's head accountant because they were a CPA. And I think like one individual CPA that was at Polly Rogers because they had done the presentation or something. He also brought up a point of like two people that presented the audit to the district in March or April were put on an agenda, and he said, well, they're not CPAs. I'm like, well, the agenda doesn't say they're CPAs. It says they work at Polly Rogers. So he's grabbing for a lot of things. The dating issue seems to be the first thing that, you know, might be a violation of anything, but.
Yeah, I'm a little bothered that we have 2 live reports out. But then I don't know, I guess in order to assess the significance of the interest, I mean, I think we didn't need to know like reclass scope and if it's even significant, the financials overall. I mean, it's a big number. Seems like it would be, but.
Yeah, the interest would be completely immaterial to the financial statements.
We don't know that.
Given what I know about
We-
how much earning they have on them, it would be immaterial.
Yeah, I looked at it too. I would agree with Brad's assessment.
I agree. I pretty much agree that it would be immaterial, but we don't know that.
You can tell by the financials.
And it's a reclass, right? Or did they not report it? Okay.
Well,
It would be a reclass.
And the other question would be is, okay, Polly Rogers at one point with respect to the dating said, we can't explain it because the people aren't here. That would indicate a bit of an audit failure by not having a complete set of files that would explain the dating. You're not, I mean, totally unrelated to what Mr. Cabe's complaint is. Are there a couple other issues going on here that indicate granted, maybe the report's absolutely correct, and are the financials are absolutely correct, but are there underlying violations of account auditing standards?
Well, my concern is if there's 2 different reports that are issued, it should be dual dated then, especially with the change in the information.
And if they can't explain why that's the case, that indicates to me the files are incomplete and don't meet standards in that case, because the files stand on their own. You can't go back to a staff person and ask questions. How did you get there? The files stand alone after lockdown.
So, I mean, we have the report that was filed with Department of Ed, and it doesn't sound like Polly Rogers filed that. The district must have filed that, correct?
The first one, yes, was filed by the district.
And there was no other report out there other than that one, other than the final one, correct?
Correct.
So what's the date on the final one? And is that the same? Is that, you know?
They kept the same date on the final one. They
Same date.
didn't update it.
Okay, and there were
That's-
changes between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should have updated, they should have gotten an updated rep letter then. I mean, to me, that'd be the violation of anything.
So is that violation something that you would think would be worthy of a violation? Or is this more of a letter of concern?
I guess what's the egregiousness here? I'm out of my depth when it comes to auditing standards. I don't know what you guys do.
So my concern personally is that there's an auditor report out there with a signature on it that isn't stamped draft. So like if I were to ever give a auditor's report to somebody, it should be stamped draft if it's not the final report. So the fact that somebody in the firm, I don't care who it was, if it was the office manager, somebody released that report. So that report was like released. They say that they had a rep letter at that point. They thought the report was final. I don't think it's super egregious, but I am concerned about the fact that there were two different reports out there. The report date never got changed. At one point in the letter or the response back, it said, well, we were within the 60 days. And it's like, yes, you're in the 60 days, but the 60 days is just for closing the file. That means the report's done, all of the numbers are finalized, no changes. So like Brad mentioned, you should have a new rep letter. The other thing would be potentially a dual dated report if there was the report out there. There's like multiple things that should have happened when there's two different reports out there. So that's what I'm concerned about personally.
So I guess in procedurally, I mean, to do anything with respect to a violation, we would really need to get to an investigation to formally then do a motion on a violation or not. Is that correct, Angie, counsel? So maybe that's what we would do here, is just simply let it evolve into an investigation. I don't know. I'm going to leave it to the folks that are more plugged into the audit these days than I am now. But are there anything else that we would want to have in the investigation report above and beyond what we have in this? But it sounds like what we're talking about is let it move to a investigation, and then we'll deal with it as in terms of a violation.
Yeah.
So
And just for the record, really briefly, because this is a recorded meeting, Angie was on mute, but I heard her voice the word yes to Scott's Scott's answer. And I just want to make sure that the recording record reflects what Angie was conveying while on mute.
So what I think would be needed, Jeremiah, would be a copy of both rep letters if there is two. So any rep letters that they have, and then a copy of the report put into the documentation as well.
And
just the auditor's report.
Timeline and crosswalk of exactly what happened, what they did between the first report and the second report. And then maybe a description of their like docketing process in terms of report release. You know, traditionally it would have multiple layers of review and sign off, and you would have somebody completely external from the engagement team, like kind of pushing the button and sending that out. So I'd be curious to see what their internal controls are overall for that.
And documentation thereof.
Yeah.
With respect to this engagement.
Yeah, exactly. That whole QC process should be documented.
And it's just an unfortunate case of, yes, we have this complaint that we particularly look at and go, gosh, what the heck is this all about? Yet it leads into other pulling on the strings and other things fall apart at that point.
I have a question on that. Is it our obligation to pull on the threads, or is it our obligation to uphold the complaint? So if someone, like, how much do we actually want to go look at everything sitting in this and say, oh, well, someone complained about you for item A, but in the course of doing all this, we found B, C, D, E, and F, and we're going to nail you for all of those. You know, like, I sit on a separate board And our task is to answer and uphold the question asked, not to go digging. So we've always kind of taken that approach with this, that if we see other things, yeah, we have to say it, but how much in scope and out of scope is that with what we're asked to do here?
Well, I guess I look at it and say, if the facts lead you wherever they take you, and if in the course of this investigation where we got information from them and they provided information to us that makes then us as the complaints committee go, wait a second, they probably should have done other things, wouldn't change the issue that the complaint's about, it leads us far afield. I'm unfortunately, I guess I would say unfortunately, comfortable with that. Because yes, it's not the focus of what the complaint was. It does indicate there are other things going on. Whether we would go out on our own to try to track it down and drag it down, it's a different story. But when it's presented to us as information from the respondent, I don't know that we can really turn our eyes away from that, in my opinion.
Well, and I think
That's a good distinction, though.
I think the underlying concern is that there's two reports out there. And so I think the questions that we're asking actually get back to whether that should, like, that piece of it and the controls around that piece of it. So I do think it goes to that, but.
My comment wasn't this case in particular. I think Scott, you answered it in the way that makes my brain agree, is that if the facts are presented to us, we don't go out looking for them, but if those facts are presented to us, we have an obligation to analyze those. And if they're in a violation of some sort, then we need to then further pursue that. I would agree completely with that.
In this case, would we, or not in this case, but in a case where maybe we had concerns about procedures within a firm, is that something that we could then refer or volley over to like the peer review committee, or how would that work, Angie?
The peer review committee, I mean, they would just send it back to us. So we would just investigate it. And then be the one to discipline for it.
Having sat on the peer review committee, I don't think the peer review committee is going to look at things that come up in peer review.
Right.
Separate apart from any other investigation. So they wouldn't be interested in this at all. To me, I think, we clearly have, it's been identified to us that there were these two reports out there, both with the same date. There were changes. Now the question is whether those changes were material or not. It's hard to say without comparing the two sets of reports. But regardless, if they did make changes, they probably should have gotten an updated rep letter and either dual dated the reporter or just the last date.
So isn't procedurally the only decision we have to make right now as to whether we move this to the investigation stage or not?
Yeah.
So really, the only thing that we have to do is that if we're closing it, but so we're not, so.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of what else might we want from Jeremiah.
Okay.
It's the fleshing out this conversation.
That makes sense, yeah.
Jeremiah, do you have what you need?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I would not envision I'd be making a motion with respect to this matter in public session.
Okay.
And with the amount of stuff that you guys are asking to see, I'm assuming you want it back at this committee and not straight to board.
Yes.
I think so.
I mean, isn't the conclusion that we're trying to understand how robust is their control environment, and like what was the failure here? Was it just, an accident, or do they have a failure of their entire control environment?
Moving on to.
Is that right? Is that how we
Yeah.
kind of looking to address this? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Moving on to item 4D3, 2024 INQ 007.
My notes vanished. 1 second. This is Trent Doman. The complainant, who is also a CPA, is a beneficiary of a trust that Doman filed tax returns for. He had concerns about Doman's work, including the possibility of over-reporting interest and not dispersing what was required. Doman said in his response that that he has since met with the trustee to review documentation that the trustee provided. And they discovered that the escrow company had reported incorrect information. So Doman has since corrected the return. He said that, Halter is not the client, and he would have sent the corrected K1 to Halter's counsel. But he was operating with information that was provided to him by the escrow company.
Jeremiah, do we know if Halter is still concerned? I mean, has he withdrawn his complaint at all, or has the amended tax return sort of set concerns?
Let me check. I don't think I've heard from Halter at all since the complaint was filed, other than to give me a bunch of information about how he was upset.
Also very quickly, but go ahead.
So first of all, Jeremiah, we got a copy of the 1041 in the refiles, and there's identification numbers, social security numbers, and EINs and stuff like that. So before, I don't know where this is going to go, whether it goes in public record or not, but we might want to make sure that gets redacted. Those numbers.
That would be redacted in a final copy.
The
only thing that I see from Halter is just a copy of the 1041, and I do see he sent an amended 1099 about a month after the complaint.
So do we know? So Goldman says he's issued an amended tax return. So we've not heard from Halter that. Well, did Halter get an actual K? You said a 1099. Do we know if Halter's got a revised or amended K1? I'm not sure why Halter would issue a 1099.
No, the 1099 was for the interest that
from the escrow company.
Yeah. So they issued an amended 1099. Then I got an email a week later where Halter had sent some request to DOR asking for asking if a K1 had been filed, but that request was from the week prior before the amended 1099. So it seems like he wants immediate results from both.
He filed a complaint within 10 days of the return being filed. And data is like, holy smokes. So we don't know for a fact that Mr. Halter has received an amended K1, which would indicate that Mr. Doman had in fact prepared an amended return. We don't necessarily know that.
I don't know that irrefutably.
Okay.
I do know that I haven't received further complaints from a person that was complaining every week since March.
And it's interesting, he makes a complaint Mr. Doman hadn't distributed that extra interest when Mr. Doman is not the trustee of the trust. It wouldn't be his responsibility to distribute income.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is to close this one.
Right. I would envision in public session, I would bring a motion to close this matter.
Okay.
Agreed.
Moving on to item 4D4, 2024 INQ 008. Bruce Tabor and Tabor Accounting Group.
Okay. So this is primarily a billing dispute, which we don't get into, we don't care about. The complainant said that Tabor's staff made veiled threats to her husband, and Tabor said that guy's not the client, the business is the client. The complainant objected to the firm sending their debt to collections. The veiled threat was like, if you come here and cause problems, we'll, defend ourselves legally or whatever. But he repeated, this seems like a billing dispute, and the complaint was filed to gain leverage.
John?
I mean, I have opinions.
You came off mute, so that's why
I had gone on mute because I was clearing my throat, and
okay. I was like, I just saw it come up, so.
To me, it's a pretty cut and dry billing dispute. They didn't like the fact that they're sent to collections, and then I don't feel comfortable opining on whether they felt threatened or not. I can't say how they reacted to however that conversation went, but I don't think that rises much to anything that we should be looking at.
Yeah,
I would anticipate.
If you're saying something like that to a client, there's probably a reason why. I mean, you're not warning your 80-year-old grandma client to not cause a scene when she comes in. I mean, something like that would seem to imply that they've had some go-arounds over the phone, for example, about the billing, and it wasn't going well.
Well, people don't like being sent to collections.
People love
I'm not really happy when I send them to collections because that means I've gone through 7 steps prior to that.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I would anticipate that in public session, I would bring a motion to close this matter.
okay. Item 4D, 5 and 6. Do you want to do these two together,
Yeah.
Jeremiah? Okay, so
Yeah.
2024 INQ 009 and 2024 INQ 010.
So the complainant hired the company that Horton and Roberts worked at, Fiducial, to do their company's accounting. Said Fiducial ended up filing their taxes late and incorrectly, and they never paid their quarterly payroll tax. Horton and Roberts are included because they're the two CPAs that they interacted with. But it seems like the bulk of the complaint is about Fiducial, which is not a registered firm. Horton's response said he resigned from Fiducial at the end of 23, had no access to their records. He worked on the complainant's return for 1 year, noted a basis issue. After advising the complainant of the problem, she blamed Fiducial. Roberts was late to respond, but in a phone call, he said he didn't get the letter, which is possible due to some staff issues about sending mail. Roberts worked for Fiducial. He was the CPA right before Horton. He said he worked on their stuff like once or twice. All the client records would be at Fiducial. He doesn't have access. Roberts said he didn't recognize the picture of the clients, so it wasn't someone that he had a lot of interaction with. He denied all the allegations made against him. He said he didn't miss any deadlines, and neither of them provided any payroll services.
Discussion?
Again, one that not necessarily on point, but in the complainant says, yes, they filed a suit in Circuit Court, Lincoln County, small claims, and they're talking about bigger one. Do we know against whom they filed the suit, Fiducial or against these individuals?
My assumption is that it was against Fiducial. I haven't seen anything about it. Did they say they actually filed it, or they're going to? I have now filed a small claim against Fiducial.
Yeah, and on the complaint form itself, they said filed 3/25/24. They give the case number and everything else. They check the box yes on both, on the actual complaint form. But even with that being said, unless the case has been resolved, if they named our licensees, the licensees would not have a reporting requirement until the case was settled, correct?
Correct.
So we don't know if this case has been settled. We don't even know if the licensees are the ones named or if it's just Fiducial, which is not under our purview.
Correct.
I'd be interested to know if Horton was working under supervision of someone else. I mean, I would not want to focus on this case if he was just a staff member who had, 3 levels of supervision above him, but because he was the only licensed CPA, all of a sudden they've drug him here in front of us. Because if he's just an employee, right? Like that, like
they're both just
employees. Yeah, they're just both employees based off of
that's the way I read this too. That's the way I read this too. And so I don't think any of the behaviors in here should rise to a level that we need to find any evidence against someone for doing their job as an employee who's being supervised and being trained and expected to make mistakes and errors. It's not me getting drug into this office, putting my name on stuff.
So I looked up the case. It is just against Fiducial.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would imagine in public session, I would bring a motion to close both of these cases.
Moving on to 4D7, 2024 INQ 011.
Let me catch up. This is Roundtree. Yeah, this is another round robin thing. So Roundtree was the executor of the complainant's sister's estate. The complainant said he was a named beneficiary, and Roundtree was ignoring all his requests for a copy of the will. And something like he used his son, who was a lawyer, to send letters to make it appear that the son was counsel to try to pressure people into giving him what he wanted. Roundtree said the sister was a longtime client. The complainant was deeply involved in the estate planning and would have had copies of things that were going on, and also since has been provided with a copy of the will multiple times. And he thinks the complainant is just trying to get leverage to alter terms to get more out of this.
Comments? Respondent provided evidence that he had tried to send it via email 3 times. Respondent provides evidence that he texted him that he could come and pick it up at his office if he wasn't getting the text message or the emails. I feel like probably close.
In the absence of anybody else making any other comments, which I don't think I'm hearing, I would anticipate I would bring a motion to close this matter in public session. In public session, I would bring that motion.
Okay, moving on to item 4D8, 2024 INQ 012.
I'm not sure if it's Dohan, or Cherry or Sherry, but the complainant hired her to do his company's bookkeeping and tax reporting in November of 23. He said there's a lack of competence, care, planning, leading to taxes not being timely filed. His business manager said that Dowhan told her there were a bunch of things that still needed signed after they did the 8879 and didn't give them time to review the tax returns properly. He says he ended up signing whatever he was given to sign under duress in order to limit penalties. And that by telling him that Dowhan's company could take him on as a client and then not filing timely and saying that she was about to terminate the engagement anyway before he did, that shows a lack of competence. Because if you don't know that you can't handle the engagement, it means you are not professionally competent. Dowhan said there were issues throughout the engagement, didn't get full sales info until April 1st. She worked on the return up to April 15th, ended up filing an extension, requested all the missing info. She got all the info and some signatures on April 18th, but at that point she was out of the office and the client was told that it would be filed the following week. Dowhan denies the claims that the client had to sign all these pages, that it's not required nor a general practice, because they were saying that he had to sign every page of the return, basically. She also said, as to the complaint that he wasn't given enough time to sign, she said that the complainant had a chance to review the returns. They were picked up on April 18th, and they were told that they were not going to get filed until April 23rd. So they had time to make comments if they had something that they wanted changed. And then she denied that her taking time off is a violation of anything, or that agreeing that a client should go elsewhere is a violation.
That's professional competency to take vacation right after April 15th. That is just unacceptable.
100%. Comments?
I think there's a very significant lack of understanding of federal and state income tax from the complainant. I like how they've listed every form included in their Form 1040 here. But I don't think there's any evidence here. Like, yes, they're on extension, but the returns were timely filed. The complainant did not even understand that, right? Like nothing was late. They extended it. As long as the payment was made or they didn't know any tax, there's no penalties. Like, this is the entire tax world. So I don't see anything here. It's just a difficult situation to manage where the complainant escalated kind of inappropriately.
Go ahead, Brad.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that there is a technical issue in that the IRS only gives 3 business days after an 8879 is physically signed to file a return, or else you're in violation of Circular 230.
Is that calendar days or business days?
I believe it's business days.
So did they sign the 8879, send it back and it was not filed, or did they just have access to the 8879 and not send it back until it was filed?
The date printed on the 8879 is April 16th with a wet signature from the client. And then it wasn't e-filed until the 23rd.
Both sides said that they delivered it on the 18th. So 3 business days following the 18th is the 23rd.
Okay.
The other.
I didn't know that, Bryce.
Yeah, the only reason I know is because we ran into that issue with a couple 8879s this year.
Nice.
Related to that, and again, it's one of these ones we look at it. So I couldn't quite figure out if they were, I kind of almost read it as like, we give you the 8879 and ask you to sign it, and then we release copies to you at that point, whether they were somehow asking them to sign it before they really had a chance to review the returns, which is a circular 230 issue. But it seems like it all worked out, but I was a little confused as to whether this firm's practice is to get 8879s signed before the returns are released. They were talking about issuing the forms, but it's not enough to want to pick at it.
Yeah.
So close.
I would, in public session, Madam Chair, I would imagine I would be making a motion to close this matter.
Okay.
Can I ask a general question? Just kind of this group's thoughts on this. You know, this paragraph in here says that we will not release the returns until we receive payment. What is your firm's practice on withholding work over statutory deadlines, for example? If you got a billing dispute, you go pencils down, we're not going to finish this, but we've got it done, but until you pay us, we're going to hold you hostage on filing. Does that give rise to a violation if a complaint's made?
That's my policy, is especially for new clients, is if I have a weird feeling about the client where it's like something's come up where I'm not sure I trust them, it's like, hey, we need to get money before we give you a copy. That's rare. Most of our clients, like, here's a copy of your return. We're not going to send you the 8879 for signature until we get paid. So that way they can review it, they can check it, they can come back with questions. That way we don't have to worry about that 3-day deadline for the signature. Because we'd always have an issue where we'd send a return and then we'd file it, and then the client would come back and go, I want to do an IRA. And it's like, oh, great, now we have to amend it. But for this, we send them a PDF copy and go, here's your copy. We will get the 8879 signed from you after we get a signed engagement letter, after we get paid. But this way, the client has the ability to read, review, ask, inquire, and check. Because sometimes they catch stuff we don't. Or what about this? What about that? But we have to give them a copy to review before we sign. And so we avoid the 8879 date issue. We don't get a signature from that until they've got a chance to look at it and come back and say it's fine.
Does anybody else have common practices? Thanks, Greg.
I've had I was dragged before the committee for complaining about somebody who didn't review the return close enough, and then came back and said, oh, there's a missing W-2. And it was like, oh, why didn't you guys looked at it? Did you say anything when you saw it? And I was like, no. But it's having been burned by that a few times over the last 20 years, it's definitely something that we do.
Okay. Do you have any questions, or do you want to go over?
I would,
Yes.
Madam Chair, I would imagine in matters, the INQ matters 041, 007, 008, 009, 10, 11, and 12, I would be making motions to close those matters. And then in 006, I would be silent with respect to 06.
Moving on in the agenda, item 5, old business, none. Item 6, council advice, it says none. Angie, just want to confirm, none. She's shaking her head no for the record. And so we are going to move on to item 7 unless
Just, just so that we be clear, I will be making a motion with respect to each matter as opposed to a blanket motion. So in
Okay.
case there is somebody that
Okay,
disagrees with one.
perfect. Anything further before we move back into public session? Okay, the time is now 9:37 and we are going to close executive session and reconvene to public session.
Andrew, would you please remember that it's possible we may still have an individual in the waiting room that may want to rejoin, and see if that person is still there and allow that person to rejoin. Thank you.
Hi, I'm back.
Perfect. Today is April 15th and the time is 9:37. We are reconvening the BOACC to a public session. We are going to move on to item number 4 in our agenda, committee recommendations from executive session. I will entertain motions.
Madam Chair, in case matter 23-036, I make a motion for a finding of sufficient evidence of a violation of one or more board rules and or statutes.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, in agency matter 2023-INQ-014, I make a motion.
041.
041, excuse me, dyslexic. 041, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
I second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-007, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-008, I make a motion to close that matter.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-009, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-010, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-011, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
In agency matter 2024-INQ-012, I make a motion to close that inquiry.
I will entertain a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
I have no further motions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, new business. I don't believe, is there anything that says TBD on our agenda? Nope.
PPD?
TBD, to be determined.
Oh,
I just wanted to make sure
Oh,
that
it's
there's
just
nothing that.
acronyms, like my head goes. into-
We have
What
so,
are-
we have too many
acronyms?
acronyms.
Is there something, Jeremiah, that we were potentially planning on doing here? My brain is drawing a blank. Can you help me on this one, please?
Nope,
Okay.
I don't think we had anything planned.
Okay, so it's not just my age issue. It's we actually didn't have any plans. Okay. Okay.
Moving on to item 6, old business. We have a report from the February 15th, 2024 board meeting, report from the April 25th, 2024 BOACC meeting, and a report from the June 6th, 2024 board meeting. Any comments, discussion on those? Hearing none. We will move on to item number 7, announcements and adjournment. I don't believe there's any announcements. Then we are going to have our next meeting on Thursday, November 7th, 2024. And I will close the public session for the BOACC meeting at 9:43 a.m. I think this is the fastest we've ever done a meeting.
Blow right through it.
So thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
What?
Brad, I owe you something. I will call you later today.
Okay, sounds good.